reverse a little bit so we don't have to run over the pressure washer anymore. Now, that pretty much fills up that that silo, where we can't get a full tank in that silo, so I'm not even going to try it. All of the rest of the wheat that we harvest is going to be overflowed into the silo down at the cow farm, which means we'll be able to get up here and back, or there and back, before the harvester gets filled up. But maybe people would be happy with Farm Sim, either if Giants did produce more maps through a year, or if they partnered with some of the map makers, so that they can say, Oxygen David, produce us some maps, and hey, you know what, we'll sell the maps and you get a cut of it. But at that point you're producing a quality product in essence in-house. You could probably reduce the number of QA personnel you have and increase the number of asset developers. But it would then mean that every mod that is produced would be available on both console and PC. Because Giants would have control over what it is, and that would be less objectionable to Microsoft and Sony, or whoever's producing the console stuff. I did that badly. Let's turn the wheel the other way, and then we will actually get through the gate. Yay. I'm not sure if Train Sim has Thomas the Train mods. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't gone looking. Hi, Plough. Oh, he's halfway up the line. I mean, as far as Train Sims go, I am a fan of Steam, predominantly British Great Western 1930s era, and so the stuff I get for Train Sim at the moment is pretty much limited to West Country, Great Western, British Railways era, because they don't go back as far as the 1930s. They pretty much concentrate 1950s or more modern. But there are a lot of assets available, both free and paid for, in that particular region. I'm not a big fan of US railroads. I'm not a big fan of European railroads, because it's not something I grew up with. In the UK, you tended to go everywhere by train if it was long distance, because when I was a kid, most people didn't have a car. It's actually quite funny. I'd moved away from home. I got into a little bit of financial trouble, because the only jobs I could get were retail, and they don't pay well. And I was trying to retrain for IT, and I needed to come home so that I could concentrate on studies rather than worry about paying the electric bill. So my parents put me up for probably about 6 months, and then I went and bought my own apartment because I got into IT and could afford it. But while I was back with my parents, one of the girls I'd gone to school with happened to be down at the pub one day that I went down there, and I can't remember if she was waiting for anyone, but she was basically back visiting her mum, and we were talking about where we were in life, and she had a boyfriend, and she was telling me she had a car. I had a motorbike, she had a car, and her boyfriend had a car. And she stopped and she said, when we were kids, it was very rare for our parents to have a car, let alone having 2 cars in the family. And yet here I am, me and my boyfriend, and we both driving convertibles. So we're doing much better than our parents were. We laughed about it, but it's kind of true. Back when I was a kid, my parents didn't get a car until I was 12. And the car we got was my grandfather's car. Because my mum's brother, his job took him to South Africa. And so he emigrated to South Africa and he had a car. And so he left it to my grandfather, and my grandfather gave us his car. And then a few years later my grandfather died, so we gave our car to a struggling couple at church who needed a vehicle. And we got my uncle's old car. About 4 or 5 years after that, my dad qualified for a company car. And so once again they got rid of the old my uncle's old car. I mean, those cars were probably 12, 13 years old when we gave them away, so they weren't particularly valuable. Mechanically they were sound. They were kind of patched with Bondo, but outside of that, they worked. And so giving them to young couples at church wasn't a big hardship. We had the company car, so that was fine. But we had one car. And my dad didn't use the car to go to work. He used it when he had to go on site visits. And he got fed up with the train drivers always going on strike, so he got a motorbike to drive to work in London. And that was pretty much the only motor vehicles we had when I was growing up. And even when I left home, they still just had the one car. And when my dad was made redundant, he lost the company car, but he basically bought a small family car, and that was the first car he owned. It was the first car he paid for. Up until that point, we'd had my grandfather's car, my uncle's car, and then company cars. But you just didn't have a car most of the time. You travelled by bus, you travelled by train, because if you lived in town, it was more convenient. You didn't have to look for a parking spot. Okay, that's full. You didn't. When I was a kid, you didn't have to look for a parking spot. When I left home, you then had to look for a parking spot and pay for it. And it wasn't till I was in my 30s I bought my first car. And because I lived out in the country, the buses weren't quite as reliable or quite as subsidised as they are in London. And the next town over was about 15 miles away, and a bus would cost $1.50 each way. And to drive my car, it was $1 to park, and a lot less than $2 more on gas. It's about the cost of gas over there. And the bus took an hour to travel 15 miles. My car took 15 minutes to travel 15 miles. So I kind of stopped using personal or public transport at that point. But when I went to London, I would drive until I got to the tube network. I'd park the car up and I'd take the tube into London, because you can walk, bus and tube all around London for a reasonable price and a lot cheaper than parking was. I mean, parking in London you're talking about $10 an hour, and that's ridiculous. And they've got to the point now where if your employer has built a parking lot for employees, the amount of tax the employer pays for the privilege of having their own parking spaces is ridiculous. So, yeah, you want to work or travel into London, travelling by train is actually the easiest way to do it. It does mean if you're going shopping, it's what you can carry, not what you can put in the back of a car. Now, as I said, I haven't lived in England for about 20 years. Back then, I would take a motorbike into London. I had a BMW with the full touring kit on the back, so I could carry a reasonable amount of stuff on it. In it, but London's become kind of an unfriendly place to go. So I'm kind of happy living in the countryside in America, where there aren't any buses at all, really, except the odd school bus every morning. But even then, what was it? We had a couple of foster kids, and the morning bus came by our place at 6:30 in the morning. School didn't start until, about 8. And Mrs. Osa was sort of, I'm not getting up at 6:30 in the morning, or 6 o'clock in the morning, to kick the kids out of bed and make sure they have some breakfast, because they're going to have breakfast if they're going to be leaving at 6:30. And while they get breakfast at school, because they were foster kids and so they're in the social services system, everything is subsidised for kids there. And so we didn't have to pay for school lunches or school breakfasts. They could just have school lunches and school breakfasts. But it's a little hard to kick a kid out of bed at 5:30 in the morning and then say, you're not going to get anything to eat until 8:30. So they're going to be they're not going to be happy kids. Now we didn't have Thomas the Train TV shows when I was a kid, but I did have, I want to say, about 23 books that were the stories written by Reverend Audrey. When he started that off when his kid had chickenpox or German measles, something like that. He was sick in bed. And so he would tell his kid train stories. Oh, look what's happened over here. Let's stop here. Stop here. Stop. Let's jump out and go and move that. I completely missed the message that said, hey, tractor's stuck. I'm going to have to turn this round when I finish harvesting the field. But for now, we can park that there. And, so yeah, Reverend. Oh, sorry, did it? How's it sound now? Okay, that was possibly Twitch cut out, because it looked for a second there like the stream dropped too. But yeah, so Reverend Audrey basically wrote about 21 small little small little books, with some were just one story in them, others had 3 or 4 stories in them, depending on how short the stories were. And we had all of his books. And then when the son Christopher grew up, he decided to continue the series. And I think it kind of took a different path at that point. And then with TV studios, they tend to take a different path as well. So yeah, my grandfather was a train enthusiast as well. He had a model train set in the garage, and when he died I inherited pretty much all of it. Although I don't know where a lot of it ended up, because my mum and dad can't find any of it. Okay, let's extend that. We'll drop that round about there, and yeah, I think there's a lot of things from childhood that have become more cartoony as things have gone on. Is that working? Yes. Q has a full grain tank already. We're probably going to have to bring a shovel around here and help the wheat into the silo. Uh-oh. Unfortunately, the placement of that silo just doesn't work well. You can't get the pipe over that wall. And you can't get the pipe close to without. You could possibly reverse into there, but it's awkward. Of course, a lot of the things from my childhood were too violent for kids these days. Apparently, having a mouse smashing a frying pan into the face of a cat isn't kid-friendly anymore. Yeah, there were a whole bunch of UK kids shows that were claymation, and they have been replaced by cartoons, not just Bob the Builder. Bob the Builder was after my time. I mean, it was either claymation or, you know, stop motion series back in those days. Is it raining? Nope, we're still good. And the harvester stopped going the other way, of course. But we are getting close to done, although it does look like it's getting overcast. So expect rain within the next 35 minutes, I think. Let's do a little trip around. You're sat there. So this has turned out fairly okay. We're going to have to go the other side of that mound to finish off this field. This is almost done. What I wonder, actually, let's jump out and jump there and then jump out. Let's run over here. Look at this. So we've used 175,000 litres of digestate. Now, admittedly, some of it is in there or in the tank back there, but 175,000 litres of digestate just on one field. This is why I make so much stuff. What is it? Silage for sale. I think it was for year prior to this one, I actually started needing to use slurry and manure to work the fields. Typically one field exhausted 90% of my slurry and manure supply from both the pigs and the cows. But digestate, I mean, you've seen I've used 175,000 litres, but I've got potentially 500 bales wrapped of grass at the moment, which we are going to sell. I was planning to sell them at the barn, but frankly, we now need the digestate, so I'll ship them all up to the BGA and laboriously empty them into the digester there. And we've also still got a silo of silage up at the BGA, which I haven't even cracked into yet because I haven't needed it yet, although I know I do. Yeah, claymation series. I mean, we had things like Trumpton, Camberwick Green and Chigley, which in that particular universe were neighbouring towns. We had not claymation but stop motion. You had the clangers, the wombles, and a bunch of other kid stuff. But they all, some of them went cartoon, I know that much, but they're all done with now. You have to go and search the BBC archives to see what they look like. So we're still okay with the weather. And it's 1 o'clock. So we've been on for about 4 hours and I need to think about food. Mrs. Osa's gone out for a thing and there's food provided, so I need to figure out that myself, or for myself today. She wanted me to do some stuff. Gonna have to figure what that was. So we'll get this down to the end of the row. We'll stop when we get there. And I'll do a quick trip round the other mobile vehicles and see where they're up to. Oh, I remember. Yes, I need to set a fire in the backyard. And sweep the leaves. And I should probably start thinking about that since Mrs. Osa may be back soonish. And won't be particularly happy if that's still a thing needs doing. So, up and coming streams, I will be back on Monday with Ungertheim on Farm Sim 19. Start from scratch with Seasons series. And I'm going to race this up to the end here. At the moment, I'm really not sure what other series I want to run, which is why I've not been streaming other days. I mean, to be fair, I haven't been playing that much computer games lately. Okay, so that's all that. We can probably trip forward a little bit. Okay, we are empty. We will close that. We will turn that off. As that's folding in, we'll close the top. Okay, so plough's still running. I'll put that over there just in case it starts raining between the end of this season series, or today and next. And we'll let that turn around and we'll dismiss the worker on this. Then I need to get off for the rest for the day. Nicely done. Put the brakes on and stop the man. Ooh, back up. Okay, that's that tractor done with. Gonna let this one turn around and then we'll stop this one too. So yeah, Ungertheim on Monday. We'll be back next week, at least as far as I'm aware, for another instalment of Lawfolds. Of course, at the moment, since we're trying to sell our home, I may have to change some of the scheduling. But right now I'm really not playing much in the way of computer games when I'm not streaming, and I'm only streaming 2 nights a week. Alright, you're done. Brakes and stop. Engine off. So I think that's everything parked up and good. So I will call it done for the day. I may do a little bit more offline, just to progress things, make sure the wheat's put away and stuff like that. But for right now, we're kind of done. So I'll wish you all a good weekend. As I said, I'll be back on Monday, and I'll see you then. In the meantime, I have to go and do stuff, so I'm out of here.